Okay, in order to get low hold clutch piston in, it's one of the O-rings is gonna ride on this race right here. So make sure you lubricate this entire race here, and also the inner O-rings. They're gonna touch the inner race, so lubricate this entire part right here. And on here, you're gonna lubricate both these O-rings, so this entire inner part, and it's gonna ride on this, the side of the right here. It's gonna ride on to the O-ring. So lubricate all around that edge here, and then you should be able to take this and just carefully place it in. And its orientation, the way I remember it is, it actually rode these little notches right here. Make sure that they don't block these holes. So it went in between these holes. That's how it locks in. So it should be something like this. And then you're just gonna slowly work this. I'm basically just rotating it like this. And then I'm going to try pushing down on the edge here until it goes down. Alright, so that's how it should look like when it's fully down. It'll kind of just drop in. And then you put this low piston over the low hold piston. So make sure the O-ring is here and inside here, and then lubricate in here with ATF, and this outside edge with ATF. And also we're gonna lubricate, I think it's gonna go, it must ride in here is what I'm thinking, right on top of this. So I'm gonna lubricate that. Okay, and just in case I'm wrong, I'm gonna lubricate this. But okay. Yeah, I'm probably wrong actually. I bet this is the race here. So I'm gonna lubricate this race. So maybe it's this is the race, and then this is the race also right here. So I'm just gonna rock this like that. Got the sides going down. Okay. So it's literally just like it's stacked on top of each other. I have no clue how this system works, but I'm guessing that first hole must activate maybe the low piston, and then the second one maybe activates the low hole. I have no clue. So, okay, so this right here, this groove, I'm pretty sure that's for the circlip. So the spring, yeah, I think how it works is that like this. The spring goes on here. And then you've got your retainer. Yeah, this makes sense. The retainer and then the circlip right here. And I'll use that that screw type thing, this thing that I made for all the other clutch baskets. So I'll use that. I'll compress it down, and I'll be able to put the circlip into its groove, which is that groove right there. And then I should be able to put all the disc and plates in here. I'm not even sure how it works. I'll look at the diagram, because there's two parts. There's like a star type plate and disc set, and there's 3 pieces of each for the plate and the disc, and then on top of that is low gear, and there's more gears. I'll look that up. Okay, so here's the setup that I've been using. So there's the bar, there's the wrench on the coupler nut. Still haven't cut that off. Basically, the circlip is already in place. So as soon as I compress this, I'll be able to push that circlip into its groove right there onto the piston. And this piece right here is just extra so that I don't have to spin that down so much. So basically just put a second wrench on here and just spin it, and it'll tighten down. It'll compress that spring. Okay, I was having a hard time trying to put this down because it wouldn't center. Like the middle shaft from the low hold piston wouldn't go through this retainer. And so I found out the trick is just take something like this and just be careful you don't try to shift this, because if this shifts off, the whole thing could slip and then you could hurt yourself. But basically, leverage it on the spring and on the corner of this, and so you can center it, and that's what I did. And then while I held this, I spun this a little bit so that it would compress a little bit more, and then the shaft would center itself, and then I could let this go, and then you should be able to crank on this the rest of the way. Right, now that I've pushed it down far enough, you can see that I've got room to slide that circlip into its groove there. Just use 2 flatheads or use circlip pliers like that. And that's basically the trick if you're gonna do some homemade thing like I did. Okay, once you have the circle clip down, basically you're gonna hold it here and then you're gonna work your way around here. I use my fingers, but this is kind of sketchy, so be really careful. I held it down here, then I held my finger down here, then I used the screwdriver to work it down here, and then I used this screwdriver to push it here to spread it out, and I just kind of like pushed it until it snapped down. And then when you think it's in, try to spin it like this to make sure that the circle clip actually is in there, because if it spins evenly, it probably is in there. Alright, so here's second clutch, and that's what it looks like once you compress it down. And I did the same trick, except I used my pliers and I wedged it on the retainer and I pushed it so it'd center over the shaft, and there's like this loud clank, so I thought I was in trouble, but it worked okay. I think maybe the retainer was actually stuck on the top shaft, is why it came off so suddenly. Alright, here you can see the circle clip just before it goes down. So basically I put my finger here and held it down, and I used my other finger. I pushed it down and I worked it around here, and then once I got to here, it should just snap right into place like this, just like that. So just hold it down, then while you're holding that down, put another finger around back here and push it down as you go around, and then eventually you can push it down here. You might need a flathead screwdriver to help you push it down, because it might take a lot of strength, more than your finger can handle. And then always spin this. I can't do it with my finger, but spin it with your flathead. If it spins evenly, it should be seated. Alright, this is first and second gear again. Second gear's already been put in. It's basically just steel plate, and then the friction disc, and then etc. until you get to the end plate, and then you just put the clip back in. I mean, this is pretty much like all the other clutches, so it doesn't need to be explained that much. The low, let's see, it's called the low, I think it's called the low clutch, low hold and low clutch. This one's the most complicated out of all of the clutches. It's so complicated, I can't remember the two parts of it. So what happens is you're gonna first put in this star piece, this metal plate. It goes in first. I am pretty sure that there's no spring, so put that plate in first, then put a disc in, and I'm pretty sure this is it, the smaller one. And then I believe there's 3 of these star-shaped discs, and so this is going to be for low hold. So 3 of these starting with the plate, and then 3 of these. So then what's going to end up happening is, since you put the steel plate on first, the last piece is going to be your friction disc, and so what goes on top of that is this transition piece, which is a friction no, it's a steel plate. So this goes on top of the last friction disc, and then I'm going to reuse my spring ring. So I'll reuse this on there. This new piece is the same as this old piece. These are the old friction discs for that star plates. Those. So once you put the transition piece on and the spring, I believe what goes on after that is, I'll double check, but it's probably one of these steel plates. I think these are all the same, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 it looks like. So this I believe goes on top of the spring, and then it's just gonna act like any other clutch. So once you put that steel plate on, this on, then you're gonna start alternating your friction disc. So after that steel plate, friction disc, blah blah blah, until you get to the last piece, which again is going to be a friction disc again, because since you start with the steel plate, you're going to end up with a friction disc. And then on top of that, just like every other clutch, it's going to be an end plate. And this one you have to select. For mine it's 3.5 millimeter, and this is the old piece, but this is what it is. So this is 3.5 millimeters, and there's a 5 stamped on it, so you know it's 3.5. I forgot why this is different. I might have resized it or something. I think maybe this one was like too thick, so it's decided to get a slightly smaller one. I can't remember, but I believe 3.5 is measured not through here. I think 3.5 is measured through here. And basically, once you put the giant retaining circlip in, you're gonna feel for the plate on the end piece, which is right here. You're gonna feel, I don't know if you can hear it, but this one has slight play, which is fine. But that's how you select what thickness you need right here. Because obviously if it's too big it's not going to fit, and if it's too little you're going to have too much play. Alright, so here's the first steel plate, and okay, so I'm pretty sure how it works is like this. This piston, that small one, that's for low hold clutch, and then the rest are going to be for the low clutch. And low clutch is pretty much first gear, because nothing else is called first gear. So there's no spring, and obviously to get this into that first piston you have to put the star into here. So, and also, just like before, the stamped side, the smooth side, is going to be facing up, and this is just me being picky again, but this is the smooth side. So right into that groove right there. So there's the first one, it's locked in. Here's the 3 friction discs, and I'm gonna, even though it's probably actually wrong, I'm gonna have it so, you see the printing, you can barely see it, but it actually does say Robestos. So first thing to do is these are already soaked actually. I've had these soaked for weeks, but just so in case there's contaminants in there, I'm gonna clean it in here, shake it off, and I'm gonna put it on here. Okay, so the first friction disc, I cleaned it off, and right in there. And if you wanted to be extra picky like me, here's the Robestos logo, and then the next one, since there's 3 of them, I'm gonna rotate them to 1/3 and then 1/3. Alright, so here's gonna be the next steel piece, making sure that the rounded stamp side is up. So these are so easy because they can only go in one way. It's keyed. Another thing that I talked about is making sure that you get the updated steel plates and not the old ones. The old ones originally, part of the reason why the transmission failed was because they were too rough. So on this one, you can see this thing has like a mirror finish on the surface, and you should be able to feel it too. Another thing that you can do is get 2 steel plates, oil them up or just dry, push them together and just slide them together and see if there's a huge amount of friction. And you can get 2 plates that you know are rough, and then you can feel the difference. But these feel smooth. These are like super smooth. And I felt the ones that were really rough. For example, I think these are the Robestos ones that came in the kit, and so you can see just the surface. It's really rough, and I've tried sliding those together, and those have a lot of friction, a lot more than even the factory ones that I had. So the problem that my transmission had was the 3rd clutch, and it wasn't because of the steel plates, I don't think. It was probably because of that washer that looks like a castle nut. It was the holes for the oil lubrication weren't big enough, and I think I showed that earlier in the video. That's actually extremely important. Make sure you replace that washer on that 3rd clutch. It has like 4, it looks like a castle nut, and it's got 4 channels, and it's got an oil capture groove in the center where the spline is. So just make sure that all your steel clutches are really smooth. Okay, so what I do notice is after the last friction disc, it's flush with the piston, the top of the cage. And so next is the transition piece, which is this, and this is splined with the main outer cage, or this is called a guide actually. So that goes down. And so I guess once fluid pressure is applied, it must push up against this, because the other side of this is really shiny. So here's the old one. So it must push up against this, I guess. Okay, so once that's on, I cleaned off the old one because I'm going to reuse it. It looks okay. Goes right into that groove there. And then I'm going to double check the diagram. Okay, so I double checked the diagram, and it is steel plate first, and then friction disc, and keep alternating, and the last one you should have is a friction disc. So again, super picky about this for absolutely no reason. I picked this one to be the worst one because it seems to have more scratches than the rest of them. The rest of them seem okay. So I'm going to use that one first. And smooth side, stamp side up. So I'm going to use this one first. And then this actually, here's a logo, and I just staggered the logo across the stack. Also super picky, but I don't really care. So there's that. And the rest should be smooth side up. So steel disc, and also I did cleaned all of them in clean fluid. I actually noticed that the old bag had some like debris inside of it, so I just got a new Ziploc and got some new ATF. There also is an alignment with the friction disc, which is too late, but I'll show you how to fix it. And that part is not optional. You've got to get the alignment right, because otherwise the gear's not going to go inside of this clutch. So like I said, the last piece is a friction disc, and then all you gotta do is take like a flathead, or I can't find my pick, so I'm just gonna take a flathead. So the gear is oh, there's like dirt on that. Okay, so the gear is splined where it meets here. So make sure these are all lined up the same way. And then even though you just lined that up, you have to go around here, because then the rest of it isn't going to be lined up. See how it's kind of crooked here? So fix this and keep fixing it everywhere until everything is lined up perfectly. So now it's pretty much lined up. So once everything's lined up, it's okay. And then so when you put the gear in, it's gonna go into through the first friction disc, and you're just gonna keep wiggling it until it bottoms out. And also, yeah, I forgot there's this piece. So Let me clean that up and then I'll put that in. I actually did test fit the new part, which was 3.5 millimeters. And here's the old part. It has a 6, so I'm guessing this means 3.6 millimeters. It does look thicker than the new part. If I can zoom in. The old part looks slightly bigger, but how you can tell is when I put the new part in, it had quite a bit of play, which might actually be what I need, because every clutch has a end plate clearance limit, and so you're not supposed to exceed that limit, but the limits are not the same for each clutch, and I'm pretty sure it was this one that had a bigger limit than the rest of them, because I'm pretty sure this is the only one that's got 6 plates and 6 discs, which the rest of them only have like 5, I think 5 or 4. I think it's 5. So this one should have more slack than the rest of them. So if you notice that, that might actually be normal. But so I cleaned up the old one. I just wanted to see how much clearance it has. And see, the ring is gonna ride on there, so whatever difference this is from this to the top of this, that's the clearance limit, or the clearance. And so you'll just have to play with whatever piece you have. If you want more, then you would order one that's bigger. But I'm gonna check both of these, see which one's got less of a clearance. Okay, this is the old one. So this is exactly what I suspected. I was trying to get the exact same end plate, and even though this says it's 3.6 and this says 3.5, okay, just ignore that, because basically when you take readings around here, they're gonna be different just slightly. So on average, these are both 3.6 millimeter, just like I suspected. That's why I got the smaller one. I kind of wished I had got the bigger one, but actually that might have been wrong to do that, because like I said, this has an extra plate and disc, so it should have more slop than everything else, because just mathematically, the more you have, that gap should be bigger, because it's still the same fraction. Like if it's 10% or whatever, 10% with a thicker thing is gonna be bigger. I'm obviously not explaining that right, but you should understand that basic math principle. So since these are basically the same, I'm gonna use the new part, because actually, it's kind of scratched up. If you notice right here, it's hard to get on camera, but it's like, yeah, right there, if you can see that, there's a bunch of scratches right in the middle. I don't feel it. But this actually feels really smooth. But I'm gonna use, here, I'll try to figure it out. Disappointed that the new part's got scratches on it, but this actually feels much smoother than that part, and I can just barely feel those scratches. This feels like super smooth. I'm gonna use this. So I'm gonna put the end plate on, and so that's that clearance. and I'm gonna call it good, and I'll put the circlip back on.